LeGene's passion for education and the development of excellence among her students, faculty members, and staff is evident throughout her career. She has led diverse teams to expand and strengthen academic programs, create strategic partnerships, improve institutional fiscal health, increase enrollment, build capital improvements, and for key initiatives. She was a board member of the Association of Chief Academic Officers and was appointed to the President on Human Rights, the Status of Women. Still cutting, right? Okay. Now let me try the spot. Thank you for your patience and bearing with me as we work out the technical issues here. Attorney Quesenberry is a noted scholar and professor appearing as a keynote speaker at the Africa Summit held in Nottingham, UK, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers in Manama, Bahrain, and the Conference for the Organization on College Health in Pennsylvania. She has been recognized by her peers, students, and supervisors for her teaching and research effectiveness, and was twice named Faculty of the Year and Researcher of the Year, and received the Excellence in Teaching Award from the National Society of Leadership and Success. She served on the editorial boards of the Journal of Education, Business and Society, the International Business Law Journal, and the Clarion Business and Economic Review, and was the founding editor of the Atlantic Law Journal. She has served as the director of the Center of Research Excellence. She has served as executive director of the Mid-Atlantic Association of Legal Studies in Business and in the House of Delegates of the American Business Law Association. An accomplished scholar, she has over 50 publications and a significant grant acquisition history. She is adept at building meaningful partnerships with government, civic, and business entities that are essential for community development. She has created 2 business incubators that operate train-the-trainers programs, gestate startups, offers opportunities for students and alumni, and provides a platform for data collection for applied research in business. Her extensive international experience includes work with the British Crown Government offices in Hong Kong to provide research for the Sino-British Joint Declaration, the United Nations to create a leadership academy for women in the Kingdom of Bahrain, the Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs, and the American Councils for International Education to reform legislation and curriculum in support of transitioning economies in Kazakhstan, Russia, and Bulgaria. The Department of Trade and Industry in South Africa to further the goals of the Black Economic Empowerment Program, the Abu Dhabi Education Council to establish a federated data repository to improve higher education evaluation in the United Arab Emirates, and the American Bar Association to develop the human rights curriculum in Bahrain. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Attorney LeGene Quesenberry.
I was wondering what this square was for. I thought it might be a trap door. You might hope it is. I just gave this presentation and it was awful. So I am going to try to change this on the fly, so bear with me. How are decisions made at a university? And I'm talking to faculty, and you all know the answer. And so about this, but I'm going to go ahead with it anyway, because I have to. We make decisions based on that strategic plan, right? And the strategic plan is a good example about how decisions are made at a university, because it includes so many different people. In fact, if it's done well, it could include at least the opportunity for everyone to participate. So you have that committee, that strategic planning committee created, and then they can break up into task forces and subgroups. They can hold focus groups, and they can send out all of those surveys that you get, the faculty survey, staff survey, student survey, and they're accumulating all of that knowledge. What's important to remember is when you look at how a strategic plan is created and what the organizational chart looks like, is that it's a flow of knowledge from the ground up. So it's a grassroots organization. We need to know what people who are at the friction area, at that face-to-face participation with education. So what are our faculty and our staff and our students doing in these different areas, and how are they communicating that back up to their supervisors so that eventually it gets into the strategic planning committee and we set our priorities? Why is that important? Well, because the budget's dictated by the strategic plan. So if you want revenue to be, if you want some sort of resource to be allocated to your project, it has to fit somewhere in the strategic plan. Now, the strategic plan doesn't really change. I was asked this question as to whether or not you can amend it or change direction. Well, you've all been through this process. It's a long, intense process. You don't want somebody coming into your institution and going, oh, hey, goal 3, I don't like that. Let's not do that anymore. It's not something I could do anyway, because the strategic plan's been approved by the board, and they're the ones who decide whether or not those are the priorities of the institution. So how do you establish an action plan once you have your strategic plan in place? Well, you need to set out the steps of what needs to be done in what order and develop a timeline for it, as well as who is responsible for what. And then you need somebody to oversee that, because one of the things that can happen is you can have individuals working very hard, doing what they're supposed to be doing on time, but no one has looked over to see what's happening. So that information may not be flowing back up to the next person in that supervisory chain. So you need someone to take control of that overall scope of work so that it's being done on time and appropriately. In other words, with the consideration of what your priorities are. I had 2 experiences that I think are kind of interesting implementing action plans that were related to our strategic plan. The first one was working with UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. They support entrepreneurship. So I contacted them when I was in Bahrain, and I said, what kinds of things do we need to do to get your financial support for a business incubator we want to start at the university? And they said, well, one of the things we offer is training. We train the trainers, and we will get people certified to work in the incubator as trainers. So I went back to the university, and I got 12 volunteers, and they went through that training program and got certified so that they could work in the incubator. While they were doing that, I was working with the planning office to find space that we could dedicate towards the entrepreneurship center so that students could go somewhere, work on their programs and their projects with other students who are also entrepreneurs, so that they could talk to each other and maybe leverage ideas from what they were working on. The second was a project with the Economic Council of West African States, ECOWAS. And what they wanted to do was build a trade coalition for cocoa and rice import and export. One of the things that happened when I was discussing this option with them, how AUN could be of service to them while they were trying to do this, is Nigeria was importing rice when it grows its own rice. And of course, the imported rice was sold to the population at a higher price than what it would have been to sell their domestic rice. So it was a very big problem. Well, I ended up talking to them and said, what trade policy have you developed? Because one of the things you want to make sure of if you're forming this economic trading bloc is you don't want trade policies that conflict with each other so that you end up fighting with one another. That was kind of a surprise to them. So I went back to the Dean of Law and his faculty, and they worked with the organization to draft trade policy that had an umbrella for the whole organization so that they wouldn't be in conflict with one another. The other thing that a president does is make sure that resources are allocated towards research. Now, I've looked at all of your research centers, I've looked at the kinds of things that you're doing, and I want to leave that alone. It's working really well. And if something's working really well, don't mess with it. It'll have inertia. And what all of you are doing, if you're working in these research centers or you're producing research, keep doing that. And I'll keep trying to give you the support for you to do that really important work. It's really exciting and prestigious and is actually making Guam a center of excellence in this region. You heard that I have some experience with research, so I know how hard that is to do. One of the advantages of having somebody as president who's held a lot of different positions across the organization is that they know the difficulty of the work that you're doing. So that I have a great deal of respect for faculty members who are conducting research, who are supporting students, who are working extra hard with some students that may need that little extra support, who are developing curriculum or revising programs or revising their courses in order to make sure that our students have the best education possible. How do I handle external relationships? I worked with the vice president of Nigeria when the Nigerian government was deciding they wanted economic hubs across the country. There were going to be 5 of these, and I wanted AUN to have one of them because this was going to produce millions of dollars in annual support for makeathons and skill development and the development of entrepreneurship in an area where it was desperately needed. So that just took a matter of meeting with people and explaining how AUN was the area that had the capacity to manage that money, that we could manage it well. Having had audits of our grants, we knew we had evidence that our grants are bulletproof. The way we handle our grants were excellent, which in Nigeria was really important part of research support. Sorry. And then you're asked a question about culture and how I fit into culture. Well, I've worked in I've worked in Kazakhstan and Nigeria and Bahrain. I've worked in Hong Kong. I had a business in China a long time ago, when China was very different. I've managed international faculty at different places I've been, and I lived and worked in Texas and Oklahoma for a little while. It's also kind of odd. It is. It's an odd place. So, thank you very much.
Okay.
I need to keep it, and I need to stand on the bullseye.
About that. I think you and I might be the only 2 people in the room who've been to Nigeria, but that's another story. The standard teaching mode for teaching credits a semester, 4 courses normally for 3 credit courses. And many faculty teach more because of the shortage of faculty. With that, we are expected to, when we apply for promotion or tenure, have research account for at least 25% of our evaluation, and service for another 15. So the teaching, the 12 credits per semester, accounts for at most 60% of what we're evaluating. I had the opportunity to look into some of our peer institutions a few years ago. Not one of them has a teaching load of more than 9 credits a semester. What, in your experience, is a standard or reasonable research expectation for a university that required a minimum of 12 credits per semester? Or conversely, what would be a realistic teaching load given the research expectations?
Thank you. Well, I know you were pursuing, or at least you're interested in looking at a Carnegie classification of a DPU, which focuses more on how many graduates you produce, and I think it's 30 graduates a year in 2 areas, and get that classification. What's important in your question is, I want to know why a professor needs to teach 5 or 6 classes a semester. What happened? Is there faculty missing? Have you not filled particular positions? Are students off their academic plans in such a way that you are adding these courses in order to keep students on track to graduate? Um, and I'm very concerned about this. I dealt with this problem in Nigeria. I don't believe that you can effectively teach, conduct research, participate in community engagement, assess your students, hold your office hours, serve on committees with a load like that. So 4 courses is generally standard, right? And most of the time, what I have seen are 3 courses and one class that's a double. So you've got 3 preps, right? But 4 courses. What the research load should be for something like that should be decided and determined within your college. So the dean of the college meet with the faculty, with the chairs, and decide, okay, what is the major part of my job? Is it teaching or is it research? And I understand the percentage and I understand what you're talking about for evaluation. But there are some disciplines where it's more conducive for one or the other. And how I've tried to deal with this is to say, look, if you are considered teaching faculty and the majority of your job is teaching, then produce some research regarding teaching or assessment or student interaction or student reaction to certain things, because you will have that data from your classes. So it makes it a little bit easier. Again, as just a broad statement, generally 2 journal articles in a 5-year period. Now, I haven't seen too many universities specify the level of journal. That can be done. There are some universities that say you have to produce in a tier 1 journal how many 1, 2 within such and such a period of time. That's up to you in your discipline, your dean, and your chairs. Okay, but I understand your concern is very serious, and it reflects on accreditation. The potential for accreditation is affected by overloading faculty to the point where you can't really do your work. The other thing that happens is people burn out. You have very enthusiastic faculty that want to be there for their students. They know these courses have to be taught in order for students to graduate. They're going to get in there and I'm going to work in the trenches and I'm going to do my job. And 3 or 4 years later, you're like, oh, I got to get out of here, right? So we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that we have respect for you, that we give you enough time for you to recover periodically. Believe me, I've taught classes every once in a while. Used to tell students I grade their exams. I always gave essay exams. I never gave a multiple choice test. And I said, look, it takes me time. I've got to get a bottle of wine, work my way through this. So I do understand it is not an easy job. And if you really care about your subject matter and your students, it shows. So what can I do to support you in changing this? Well, let's see if we can hire more faculty. This is where it gets tricky. Are you willing to close programs or close courses in order to lighten the load on the remaining faculty? You did an ROI exercise, right, recently. You looked at the return on investment of your courses within the past. So you know what courses are producing credit hours, what courses are producing revenue for the university, and which ones are lagging. So do you want to have that conversation? I think it's best if you start having that conversation among yourselves. Are there areas that you can eliminate in order to free up faculty and staff for other work, or at least their positions, so that we can fill those positions within the budget? This is all going to come down to appropriations and whether we can convince the government that EOG is worth it. Which I think is Mark around? No, Mark somewhere else. Okay. We get Mark talking to the government official, we'll be okay. Because he talks about how there are graduates all over this island who are contributing to the economy and the future of Guam. And it's because they had this opportunity to get their degrees from this institution. So if we can actually get that data and start showing politicians, look, you're benefiting from this university. You need to give it the resources. And don't look at our grant money because it has nothing to do with operations and faculty pay, which I think you've got a lot of money. No, yeah, but it's for something else. Okay. All right. Thank
you. Okay. If none, I'm just going to read this straight from the cards. The first question is, I see you have been an employment labor law practitioner. Did you represent employees or labor?
Oh, not at the same time. I have been, I served on the grievance chair of the faculty. I served on the grievance chair of the faculty union at the university I worked at. And I have worked for management on the development of a collective bargaining agreement. I happen to like organized labor a lot. I'm of that ilk that organized labor is what built the middle class. Organized labor is what can bring back the middle class if we ever get our stuff together in the States. This is why I like to work in a union environment in a university. I had people come into my office regularly telling me that they were representing people. No, this is a non-union place. Telling me this problem, that they've talked to other people in their unit and they're concerned about such and such. Only to find out that's not true. This individual was only complaining about this or bringing this to my attention in order to further their own personal agenda. That doesn't happen with a union. You've got a point of contact because somebody represents the faculty and they talk to management with a united voice. So your participation in your union is critically important. Because if you don't participate, they don't know what you want, and then they're just representing fewer and fewer people that are the loudest voices in that remaining group who's participating. Do you get what I'm saying? you gotta let your union know what it is that you want. The second thing I like about it is that we have a collective bargaining agreement that's been negotiated generally over a period of months. We know the positions that each other has and why, and we've written it down. So now I've got a document I can refer to. 2 documents on my desk, the strategic plan and the collective bargaining agreement. It's not perfect. These are never perfect documents, but they are at least a starting point of what our rights and responsibilities are towards one another. So that's a lot easier than having somebody come into my office and say, you know, this happened, by the way. We had, our chief information officer was arrested. This is in Nigeria. Which caused kind of a huff-a-puff, right? Well, the new CIO that I appointed comes to my office and he says, okay, I've discovered that we are supplying internet to a lot of different people in Yola. And we're also servicing not only their equipment, but their software. And we're not getting paid for that. Okay, we've got to stop doing that. Well, he's the one who said to me, that makes us an internet service provider. And I thought, yeah, we're violating Nigerian law because I know we're not licensed to do that. The next person that walked into my office said, you know that brand new sewer septic tank system we just put in the admin building? It doesn't work because sub-Saharan Africa is too hot for that system. All the bacteria die before they can start to break down the material. Okay, I'm a brand new president. The first day I was president was internal audit coming into my office and saying, we haven't done any work in over a year because we were told not to. In Nigeria, I thought, I need to find out why that happened. So that's when we ran our KPMG audit on the finances of the university with the help of the board making that decision. The last thing that happened to me, and the reason I'm telling you this is these are different people coming into my office. The last thing was an individual came in and said, you know, we have guns on campus. This is a big deal in Nigeria. You're caught with a gun, you go to jail. You might go to jail for a long time before you ever go to trial. So I'm like, well, of course there are. Let's go look at them. So I follow this person down, open up these big steel cases, and yep, there's automatic weapons, and pistols, and the pistols are sitting in fresh oil. So these things have been handled recently. Okay. So now I got to go run back and contact the board, the chairman of the board, and say, hey, we've got a problem. My whole period of time at AUN was kind of like being in a cartoon. I was just wondering when that next anvil was going to drop on my head. That kind of thing partly comes from trust, right? All the individuals on the campus, all these individuals that came to me because they trusted me. Somehow I had managed to prove to them that I was trustworthy and honest, and they were bringing forward complaints that they've had for a long, long time, but didn't dare speak to power before. So I want to have that kind of relationship with people. Come to me and tell me what's wrong. I want you to be able to tell me. I don't want any fear. I want people to be able to come and tell me I've made a mistake. I just discovered it. Oh, okay, well, let's try to fix it. Okay, so I would be happy to be your next president, and I wish you well regardless of what the decision is. Thank you. I had a conversation about this. We need to get the appropriation, right? We need to get the funding from the government, or we need to start looking at where we can cut the budget and move that money to faculty salaries. Because as I understand it, you haven't gotten a raise in a long time. So we need to make sure that you're in parity with other raises that have been given across the university, and make sure that you are happy or at least satisfied, and that we're not going to lose you to competing institutions in other places. So that would be, one of those questions. We sit down with the union president, we sit down with the VP of finance, and try to find out where we can find the money, where we can move it around, or where we can increase that revenue stream so that we can pay faculty. Another thing to do is to try to reduce that load that was talked about. You can't work like that. I don't think the accrediting bodies won't like that. They just won't. They're not going to continue to accredit a program where people are teaching 6 courses a semester.
Thank you. And the next question is, student enrollment is in a downtrend, due in part as an effect of COVID. Likewise, the UOG budget is in a downtrend. As an administrator, could you outline concrete steps you will undertake during your first 100 days in office to increase student enrollment and show concrete steps to increase the budget appropriations to the university as well as from other sources?
Okay, one of the first things that I would do within that first 100 days is build relationships. So I'd want to meet with all of the individuals in government that impact on your mission and your ability to do your mission, and who have some ability to affect the revenue that you get, or the appropriations you get from the government. That takes a while. It takes a while to build those relationships. But as I said, if we can start to make an argument to prove to government officials that this is a very good investment, you get a return on this investment that's much more valuable than what you've spent, then I think we can go a long ways towards winning that approval. I of course, I have the same concern you do about the budget that's now in Congress, that it looks like things might be cut. Now, I understand all the tax revenue that's generated here stays here. Okay, do you have a problem with taxes not being paid? Okay. That's another thing. Your accounting program, your students and your faculty in accounting could maybe do some research on that. That's that applied research. Give it back to the government and say, look, here's one of the problems you're having. You're not collecting the revenue sources that are due. You're not getting the money that is necessary, or you're not getting the money you're supposed to get. there's two things that go on in a budget. You look for places to cut costs, and you look for places to raise money. One of the things I'd like to do is talk to faculty members about being more entrepreneurial. And I know you hate to hear that because it sounds like I'm saying, well, you go raise your own money. But that's really not what I'm saying. How can we as an institution build out revenue generating money? One is summer courses generally generate money. Graduate courses, international students bring in money. Business entities. If we have this hatchery, this tilapia hatchery and the shrimp farm, if we could commercialize that, would it produce enough money to make it worth it to do that? Are there other kinds of even small business activities we could do across campus that would start generating money to put into that general fund so that we could afford what we want to do? I hope that answers that question. 100 days on the one.
We have a question from Dr. Louie.
Yeah, I don't need a microphone. I can do this very loudly. I'm trying to bite my tongue because I don't want to promote my own work. But you've made reference to, and it sounds so much easier. I think it's understandable to say we make an argument to the legislature to increase our appropriation. We've done that every year. But with reference to my work, I put together the economic impact of UOG. It was work done before the pandemic. It was finally produced, I think, in August of 2020. So the calculation's been done. Based on fiscal year 2019, when UOG got $27 million in government appropriation, I ran the number with using the standard economic approach for economic impact study, direct and direct induced effects. And the summary of it is that UOG contributed $350 million to this $6 billion economy. UOG created 4,100 jobs during that fiscal year. And UOG contributed $78 million of tax collection during that year. So we actually have numbers, and it's been presented repeatedly to the legislature with no effect. We're down to $23 million of appropriation now. So my question to you is, so these are things we've already done. Would you approach it differently? And what confidence do you have that you will be more effective than we've done before?
Thank you. Yeah, it's very difficult to figure out why politicians make the decisions they're making. If you're watching anything that's going on in the mainland, it's like, well, I don't get it. But anyway, maybe take that information to the broader public and see if maybe you've already done this. Do you have the ability to initiate a recall petition? Can you institute a recall position in Guam for your officials? No? You voted them in, right? You're supposed to be able to vote them out or get rid of them. Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I mean Guam. I'm sorry. I mean, as a population, is that an option available to? In other words, I'm asking whether that's legal in Guam, whether you can, because you vote these people into office, and then you're supposed to be able to recall them out of office if they're not following your directives. How long has this current representative been in office? Oh, ah, great. I don't know. We would have to. Yeah, I don't have a solution to that. All I can say is we would try to work together on figuring out what we might be able to do. If if getting to the politicians doesn't work, then finding investors that will invest in your university, not grants that have restricted monetary requirements, but uh, entrepreneurs and successful individuals that will release, that would provide money for a capital project, for example, or money for scholarships. That's always pretty easy to get, and I know it's really good at raising money. So, this has not been a new problem for you, right? This is ongoing. Not that I know of. Uh-uh. But we wouldn't say that. We wouldn't say you're giving this money so we can pay our faculty. We would say something like operating costs or the development of human capital, or I don't know what we'd call it. We'd find some way to talk about it. Pardon? Yeah, social justice. Yeah, no, that's not how we would present that to somebody we were trying to get money from.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have a question from Dr. Barker.
Okay.
Yeah, so in some of this stuff and dealing with these problems, we have faculty who operate through our various faculty governments, the union, the Senate, and we mostly deal with academic matters. And currently within the administration, beyond those forums, faculty have very little voice in the upper level decisions. Faculty are not active right now in preparing our message to the legislature, nor are faculty active in many other decisions, like whether to hire faculty or whether to do other things. And unfortunately, and I'll just note this on the side of what the previous discussion was. I think the response of our legislature is partly a response of the general island, where many of them really don't concern with the university too much at all. And yet here we are, land-grant university, with a faculty that is indoctrinated in service and other. I think they've lost sight of that we're probably the greatest hub in the Western Pacific for knowledge and information and help in terms of doing it. So I think part of it is, how would you bring, or would you consider bringing faculty into your inner councils, making highest level decisions, and possibly even helping in terms of finding ways to reach out back to the government and make the government our client? Because I think that's the key.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, making the government your client is a really good idea. You've got so much knowledge here at a university, but you especially, because of the research you do and the diversity of your programs, that going back to the government and saying, we can teach you how to propose a budget. We can teach you how to read a financial statement. We can teach you how to write something for marketing, or I'm sorry, those are all business, but the university can provide you a service for a fee, and yeah, start selling our services that way. And if the government becomes a client of ours, it has that additional benefit of us being able to say, we're good enough for you to hire to teach you how to do certain things. We should be good enough for you to fund something like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to the next question, I would like to let everybody know that we announced that there will be an additional 90-minute session with all of the finalists, including Attorney Quesenberry. And you can see her again on Wednesday, which is tomorrow, at 2 p.m. in the Fine Arts Theater. So this is for a 90-minute Q&A with Attorney Quesenberry. So please take note of that. The next question from the audience is, what relationship, if any, have you had as a student, faculty member, and or administrator with land grant institutions?
Okay. I attended one. Um, so I understand the mission and the importance of why these kinds of institutions were started, and why would anyone want to set up a university on Guam? Well, we know the answer to that, right? We wanted to make sure that the population was educated. Guam is strategically important. Um, there's some history there, uh, but yes, you're also a Sea Grant institution that I have less experience with. So, yeah, I'd like to have conversations with you on how you see a land grant university operating on an island this size, and talk about what you do as a Sea Grant institution. That's all I have to say about that. Is there something in a strategic plan for a fine arts building? I am an avid art collector and art advocate. I represent artists often for nothing. But when you look at the ROI on credit production in that book, you'll find things like theater, fine art, very, very small percentage of overall credit production. So did a proposal for a fine arts building make it into your strategic plan? Will it remain fine arts, or are you going to turn it into something else? Okay. One of the important things to notice, I don't want you to think that I want to get rid of those programs because they're in your ILOs. So what I'm interested in doing is finding out how to increase credit production in those fields by reaching out to the general population, people that come here temporarily, like service people that might be interested in taking one of those courses, auditing it, but not having to enroll in the university. And I talked a little bit about this, whether that's legally available to us, to have somebody audit a course, pay tuition, pay credit, normal tuition, and then get either a transcript from that or some kind of certificate, and whether or not we can generate credit hour production that way, or maybe you have some better ideas for doing that. Because it's in your intended learning outcomes, it's not optional, right? Intended learning outcomes are evaluated by accrediting agencies to determine whether or not you're fulfilling your mission. And you've decided by having those listed as your intended learning outcomes that they're important for you. So we'd want to make sure that we fulfill, we want to make sure that we are paying attention to those ILOs, right? No, I don't know. There's 40, what was the building's going to cost? What was your capital project budget? There were 3, there's engineering that's going to be built. The dorms there's work being done on the dormitories. Okay, the student center. So what are the priorities? Okay. Okay. Well, one of the, that's what I would ask. It doesn't seem to, if you've got the engineering building that's going to be new programs and hopefully attract new students, and you've got a student center which would be very beneficial for students and support students in their learning experience on campus. Trying to justify a new building in the fine arts when the revenue isn't being generated by that program, that's difficult for me. And believe me, that hurts me. I really would like to see a gallery and performing arts theater and those sorts of things on campus. But again, given what I'm just hearing, that your budget allocations are declining, that your faculty are overloaded, that you've got buildings that are in the process of being built but have been delayed, and so they're more expensive than you thought they were going to be, and buildings that need to be renovated because you're an island and the weather is really, really hard on buildings. So we would have to talk about that, whether that's a priority or not. I'm kind of feeling like it isn't.